Students, in lesson 6.6, we will working on add and subtract mixed numbers. So our essential question for this lesson is, how can you add and subtract mixed numbers with unlike denominators? So we're going to start here on the right-hand side with this green box. First it says, what operation should you use to solve the problem? And second it says, do the fractions have the same denominator? So we're going to answer these questions before we start solving our problem. So let's start reading. Denise mixed 1 4/5 ounces of blue paint with 2 1/10 ounces of yellow paint. How many ounces of paint did Denise mix? So if it says how many did she mix, if we're doing a mixture, we know we're putting things together, so that would be addition. And in parentheses, I'm going to put a plus sign to remind myself that I'm going to add. It says, do the fractions have the same denominator? So we look and we see 10 and we see 5. We know that the denominators are not the same, so you'd say no to that second question. So the first strategy we're going to do is we're going to add. So down here it says, to find the sum of the mixed numbers with unlike denominators, you can use a common denominator. So it says to estimate the sums. So what we're going to do, again, we're going to practice what we did before earlier in the week. 4/5 is really close to 5/5. So 4/5 I would round to 1 because our benchmarks we're going to use for rounding are always 0, a half, and 1. So the 1 that was originally in the problem, I'm going to add that and I'm going to get 2. So 1 in the mixed number plus the 1 that we rounded 4/5 would be 1 plus 1 is 2. Next, we're going to add the numerator. Remember, and I'm going to switch up my colors here. So I'm going to take my 2, and I'm going to think about 1/10. 1/10, is that closer to 0, half, or 1? Well, we know 1/10 is much closer to 0, so we're going to add 0 to the original 2 that we had in the mixed number, and so we're going to have 2 down here. So if we do 2 plus 2, we get the answer of 4 for our estimate. So we need to make sure that our actual answer is somewhere close to 4. So step 2, it says find a common denominator. Use a common denominator to write equivalent fractions. I'm going to recommend, boys and girls, that you use the least common denominator. We want to use least common denominator, so we're going to make a list. So we're off on our side. We're going to start listing our multiples of 5 and of 10. So the first two multiples of 5 are 5 and 10. The first multiple of 10 is 10. Boys and girls, we can stop right there. We see 10 in both lists. That is our least common denominator, and we're also going to use that to help us rewrite our denominators. So right off the back, we see that 2 1/10 already has 10 as a denominator, so we can simply leave the fraction as is to be 2 1/10. However, we do not have that as being the case with 4/5, so we have to rewrite the denominator. So step 3, it says we can add the fractions after we've rewritten the denominator. So I'm going to multiply 5 by what number to get 10? 2. That's correct. So we multiply 2 by the denominator. We have to do the same thing with the numerator, and we get 8/10. So don't forget, boys and girls, to bring over your original whole number, which was 1, and now it's 1 8/10. So I'm going to rewrite it again to be 1 8/10 plus 2 1/10. So now we can go on to step 3, which says add the fractions first. So 8/10 plus 1/10 would be, boys and girls, 9/10. And then it says add the whole numbers separately. So 1 plus 2 is 3. So now we have to write the answer in simplest form. 3 9/10 ounces is in simplest form. So what we could say is Denise mixed 3 9/10 ounces of paint. So boys, keep in mind, we're doing exactly what we did yesterday. We added the fractions, but now with mixed numbers, we have to add the fractions first and then add the mixed numbers separately, which are the two whole numbers. So Denise mixed 3 9/10 ounces of paint. So it says, did you lose the least common denominator? And everyone here is going to say, yes, because Miss G forced us to. It's just a good strategy because it's going to make sure that we're doing as little simplification as possible. So it says, number 1, explain how you know whether the answer is reasonable. So we can look at our answer and we can say, we can compare our answer to the estimate. So I can compare my answer (3 9/10) to 4, which was our estimate. Since 3 9/10 is very close to 4, we know that the answer is reasonable. Number 2, it says, what other common denominators could we have used? So Miss G suggested that everybody use the least common denominator, but we know that another strategy to find a common denominator would be to multiply the denominators. So in this particular example, the two denominators were 5 and 10, so we could have used 50 as a common denominators. So you can multiply the denominators together, boys and girls, but I recommend that you use a list and write the least common denominator because it's a better way to get you to what you need to do right off the back. Next, in the next step, it says subtract 4 5/6 minus 2 3/4. It says you can also use a common denominator to find the difference of mixed numbers with unlike numbers. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing, boys and girls. We're going to estimate. So our whole number here we have is 4. Now we think 5 6. 5 6 is pretty close to 6 6, which is one whole. So we're going to say that we're going to round that to the benchmark of 1. So 5 would be the result. Next, we're going to say to ourselves 3/4, boys and girls, is pretty close to 4/4. So we're going to say that we're going to round 3/4 to 1, and that's going to give us a result of 3. So now our estimate is 5 minus 3, which is 2. At the end, we want to make sure that our actual answer is really close to 2. So step 2, it says find a common denominator. Use the common denominator to write the equivalent fraction. Again, boys and girls, make sure that you're finding the least common denominator. So we're going to list our denominator, our multiples of 6 and 4. So 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12. Now, boys and girls, we see the least common multiple both lists is 12. That means that our least common denominator is also going to be 12. So what we're going to do is we're going to rewrite our two fractions. Make sure that you rewrite your whole number first, boys and girls, before you do anything to your fraction. So your new denominator is going to be 12. So you say to yourself, what do I multiply 4 by to get 12? And the answer would be 3. Because 4 times 3 is 12. Do the same thing at the top. 3 times 3 is 9. So our new fraction would be 2 and 9/12. Again, boys and girls, we're going to go up to the top. What do you multiply 6 by to get 12? That's right, 2. 2 times 6 is 12. And 5 times 2 is 10. So that means that our new mixed number is 4 and 10/12. So now, boys and girls, we are going to subtract. So we're going to subtract the fractions first. So 10/9 minus 9/12, boys and girls, is going to give us 1/12. And then we're going to subtract our fractions. 4 for our whole numbers. 4 minus 2 is 2. So our final answer will be 2 and 1/12. How do we know their answer, boys and girls, is reasonable? Well, we take 1/12 and we compare it to our estimate of 2. 1/12 is close to the estimate, so we know our answer is reasonable. So that is the recap on lesson 6.6.